Here's why we've got to pass voting rights legislation now. The November 2020 election had the highest turnout since 1900, despite the pandemic. The will of the majority, clear as day. But then Donald Trump inflamed his most dangerous supporters to attack the Capitol because he didn't win. Now, let me be clear. Voters decide elections, not politicians. But since January 6th, Trump and his allies have been openly strategizing about how to control election outcomes. And it's happening in state legislatures all across this country. To understand how voting rights has just unraveled in the last 10 years, we have to start back in 1965. In 1965, the Voting Rights Act was passed. The VRA gave the Justice Department the power to take action against states that discriminated against Black Americans. After 1965, for decades, we expanded the right to vote in this country. But in the last decade, the ultra-conservative Supreme Court has dealt blow after blow to our democracy, ripping out key parts of the Voting Rights Act and defanging the Department of Justice. They've opened the floodgates for voter suppression and for extreme partisan gerrymandering. With legal protections gutted and Republican leaders promoting the big lie, the situation today is desperate. Since January 6th attack on the Capitol, at least 19 states have passed 34 laws restricting access to voting. Trump and his allies are deliberately laying the groundwork in states like Michigan and Arizona to be able to challenge election results in 2024. Now, what do those laws look like? Well, it looks like closing polling locations or reducing hours, especially in places where people of color vote, limiting early voting, making it harder to get an absentee ballot, stripping secretaries of state of their independence, and empowering partisan legislatures to certify election results, burdensome voter ID requirements. It even looks like penalizing people who hand out water and snacks to voters waiting in long lines. That's why it is more urgent than ever for Congress to restore the protections under the 1965 Voting Rights Act by passing the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, and we must pass the Freedom to Vote Act to undo the GOP's voter suppression laws all across this country. Republicans have picked their path back to power: voter suppression, extreme gerrymandering, lying, and violence. To save our democracy, we must restore voting rights.